Well, good evening, and thank you for being here. I got to tell you, I'm just so glad that you made it tonight because we have a very important broadcast for you, packed with critical information. And tonight we are going to kick off that dialogue along the same vein, or I guess as a continuation of sorts in the fragmented sense of the word, to some of the conversations that we have been having here from this desk over the past couple of years, as I have been desperately trying to direct your attention toward the construction of a massive surveillance state driven both by artificial and human intelligence alike, and that will completely engulf, inflame, set ablaze, totally consume the United States and eventually the rest of the world, as our rights to free speech and free thought and free association are just snuffed out entirely, as the American people at the end of a gun barrel are directed to surrender their sovereignty to the cabal or be labeled a terrorist, be labeled a Hamas support network, and give this illegitimate government, this pedophilic occupation force, a permission slip to haul you off to some re-education camp or to a gulag, or maybe lead you to a situation where you're being put down like a dog in the street or shot in the face, as we've seen so many times, like a Palestinian child. We just spent weeks watching the Trump administration run fake mass deportation operations here in Minneapolis and across the country and other cities. And how do we know that they're fake? Well, because they didn't lead to the mass deportation of illegal invaders. But what this served as was a test run for the feds and their AI glasses and facial recognition technology and surveillance programs that track dissidents and mark them for arrest or mark them for death. And we've talked extensively on this program about Project Esther. I've done all but beg you to read the 34 pages that have been brought to us by way of the Heritage Foundation, the so-called conservative think tank, which Donald Trump, the peace president, immediately adopted and which the Trump administration began immediately implementing the very week that he took office, as he signed executive orders attacking the free speech of American citizens that question or criticize the foreign nation state of Israel, which is inextricably linked to the coming surveillance state, because the surveillance state in large part is being built by Israeli intelligence operatives, using Israeli technology, which is oftentimes stolen from or given to them directly by the United States. And this entire system is being rapidly installed under the guise of combating anti-Semitism and pushing back on the so-called terror threats that Israeli intelligence claims the United States is facing on a daily basis. And at every level of this occupied government, Israeli captured politicians are doing their part to usher all of this in. This country at this very moment is staring down the barrel of a Noahide surveillance state. And it looks like the free sunshine state of Florida is going to be ground zero for the state level implementation of all of this, because in Florida, new legislation right now is making its way to the desk of Governor Ron DeSantis, who has already traveled to Israel to kiss the wall and to hump the wall and to lick the wall and to sign other Noahide bills into law right in front of Benjamin Netanyahu. But this new bill, which is really less of a bill and more of a direct attack on the United States, goes even further than before. It's called HB945, short for House Bill 945, and it says that it's the intent of the Florida state legislature to, quote, establish a dedicated counterintelligence and counterterrorism unit whose primary goal is to conduct statewide counterintelligence and counterterrorism activities to detect, identify, neutralize, and exploit adversary intelligence entities, international and domestic terrorists, insider threats, corporate threats, and other foreign adversaries to protect this state and the United States of America. End quote. And then in the following paragraphs, they go on to define this term adversary intelligence entity as, quote, any person whose demonstrated actions, views, or opinions are a threat or are inimical to the interests of this state and the United States of America. End quote. So in other words, anything that you believe, any opinion, any thought that you have, anything that you post on social media, anything that you say to your friends or to your family members, anything that the state of Florida or the occupied federal government doesn't like can be used against you. If you think the wrong thing, you'll be classified as an adversary intelligence entity, which, you know, sounds a lot like Project Esther classifying people as Hamas support networks and Hamas support organizations and Hamas support individuals, because it is the same thing. Only this legislation in Florida goes even further because it creates a counterintelligence unit to physically go out and look for people who have the wrong views or opinions, as it states in this bill, and then spy on them. And not just spy on them, but kick in their doors and arrest them and haul them off to the gulags. This is not a theory. This is not something that I just made up. HB 945 goes on to direct the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to, quote, establish and administer statewide counterintelligence and counterterrorism unit housed at the department's Regional Operations Center, with a team from the unit assigned to and aligned with each regional domestic security task force. The unit shall identify threats by analyzing patterns of life, gathering actionable intelligence, and formulating effective plans of action, and by executing arrests or by revealing its intent to compel a response using all counterintelligence and counterterrorism tradecraft necessary to protect the state from adversary intelligence entities. The unit may conduct direct action missions on its own against a threat or may incorporate with or into other units to counteract and stop identifiable threats. End quote. So under this bill, they're not just putting the framework in place to be able to create thought control and speech control goon squads to track, trace, and control your patterns of life. Did you catch that? These people are going to have full access to everything that you do. That's what a pattern of life is. It's everything that you do every minute on a daily basis. They are going to be watching around the clock. If you dare to think for yourself, if you have views or if you have opinions that the occupied regime doesn't like. This bill establishes Noahide goon squads and deploys them against the people of Florida. Now, of course, as they lay it out in the bill, Representative Danny Alvarez, who's sponsoring the House version, and State Senator Jonathan Martin, who's sponsoring the Senate version, SB 1712, they would like to make it sound like this has something to do with America's national security interests. You know, as if they're going to be tracking down terrorists on American soil all over the state of Florida, making sure that the moment some Muslim starts talking on the phone about wearing a suicide vest, that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement will be listening in, they will deploy, and they will be able to take matters into their own hands and swiftly take these people into custody. No. That's not what this is, not at all. This is Noahidism. This is the creation of a Jewish-run secret police force that's meant to serve the state of Israel, the cause of Zionism, and the interests of international Jewry. And all you have to do to figure that out is take a good look at the only corporate lobbyist that's pushing HB 945 in the Florida state legislature. Now, before we get further into this, you should know that despite all of the schoolhouse rock songs about bringing a bill up on Capitol Hill, members of Congress taking votes and authoring bills and co-sponsoring bills and making amendments and all that bullshit, in reality, what we're really talking about at the federal level or at the state level, bills are not written by your elected representative. They don't dream these things up. No, they're written by lobbyists and handlers. They're written by donors, by paid-off staffers, or a combination of all of these things, and then they're given to the legislators to push through to force into law, and HB 945 was given to Danny Alvarez and the Florida House of Representatives by an Israeli spyware firm called Celebrite. Now again, this is an Israeli spyware firm, and it's staffed almost exclusively by former members of Israel's Unit 8200. Celebrite has sold surveillance and phone hacking tools to governments like Russia and Belarus and Venezuela, China, Serbia, and a whole lot more so that they can hunt down and arrest and torture and kill political dissidents or journalists or anyone else who gets on the wrong side of the regime. So just like Eric Trump's drone company battle testing their low-cost per kill products on kids in Gaza, Celebrite has been battle testing its counterintelligence surveillance systems on oppressed people all around the world, and now they're ready for prime time here in the United States. And they're rolling all of this out in Florida with the help from Representative Danny Alvarez and Senator Jonathan Martin and a lobbyist called Alan J. Susky, who works for Shoemaker Advisors. All of these people are now in league with Israel and with Unit 8200 as they move to create a massive Israeli-run surveillance system in the state of Florida that's not just a surveillance system, but it's an enforcement system. I would say that that's the most important aspect in all of this. These people are going to be coming after American citizens with the full legitimacy and the full legal authority of the state government of Florida when an Israeli spyware firm determines that someone needs to be dealt with. Israel is going to be calling the shots, and Israel is going to be forcing American citizens into compliance with the occupation force that they have installed all over our government at all levels. Unit 8200 is being deployed against the people of Florida by the occupied government of Florida. And while most are likely aware of what Unit 8200 is, some of you may not be. So to make sure that we're all on the same page here, let's go over some quick facts around Unit 8200. This is the IDF's high-level cyber intelligence unit. They specialize in cyber warfare and electronic surveillance. It's often been compared to the NSA, but Unit 8200's mission is far more expansive. And at the moment, it's the largest single unit in the IDF with thousands of personnel working around the clock on things like mass data collection, hacking, offensive cyber attacks. They build dossiers, massive databases on individuals, including American citizens, using phone surveillance and email surveillance and location data, social media activity to do all of that, and many future Unit 8200 members are identified when they're really young. They're recruited straight out of high school, and many Unit 8200 alumni have gone on to found tech and surveillance companies operating right here in the United States, just like Celebrate, or Axonius, or the NSO Group, or the creators of Pegasus spyware. Now, all of that information, it's pretty dark, but it gets a whole lot darker if you can imagine that being possible, because Unit 8200 tactics and technology are tested on Palestinians in their open-air prisons like Gaza and in the West Bank before they're refined and perfected and sold to American corporations and government agencies, or handed over to Israeli-run firms like the ones that I just mentioned, so that they can use them here in the United States against American citizens. They see how efficiently they can track Palestinian kids on their way to school, or how efficiently they can seize control of the minds of Palestinian teenagers on the internet and then radicalize them against Israel and then kill them. The very same thing that's so often done right here in the United States when some crazed mass shooter is being handled by internet intelligence operatives. Israel and Unit 8200 perfected that. This is why Unit 8200 is an extremely important piece of the puzzle when it comes to Jewish Zionist power projection all over the world. They spy on everyone. They export tools of repression for which they always have back-end access to governments and to private sector interests worldwide. These people are so evil that even Microsoft broke off relations with them last year, kicking them off of the Microsoft cloud services. Think about that. Microsoft, founded by mass-murdering war criminal pedophile Bill Gates, said that their use of Microsoft services to fuel the constant surveillance of the Palestinians that they're genociding was just a bridge too far, and they cut them off. And you better believe that even if they didn't say so in that announcement, part of what motivated them to cut off relations with Unit 8200 was the fact that Israel was and still is spying on Microsoft. Once you let them in, they're in. And right now, they're in the process of getting in on the state of Florida. And more importantly, on the people of Florida. This is a domestic spying machine, and it's loading up to crush dissent. This is the Noahide version of COINTELPRO at the state level in 2026. It's the same playbook, just different and modern technology in a full-scale merger with the state of Israel and its intelligence apparatus. For those of you who haven't heard of COINTELPRO, it was a top-secret illegal FBI operation run by the compromised cross-dressing FBI director J. Edgar Hoover from at least 1956 to 71. And just as they do today by justifying surveillance through calling their victims terrorists, back then, the FBI justified COINTELPRO by calling their victims subversives. All they had to do was label you a communist or an anti-war activist or a black nationalist or a white hate group or even a feminist, and they could do whatever the fuck they wanted to. They ran illegal wiretaps, they broke into people's homes and offices, they spread false rumors, they forged documents to frame people, they harassed their families, they planted stories in the media, no surprise there. All with the goal of incriminating people that they didn't like or people who the wider United States government didn't like, and then throwing them in prison. And of course, when all else failed, they killed people. At At one point, under COINTELPRO, the FBI even deployed the Jewish Defense League against the Black Panthers when the blacks got a little bit too big for their britches. One way or another, these people have always been in bed together at the expense of the American people. And while the FBI was running COINTELPRO, the CIA was running MKUltra at the very same time. In fact, many of the people surveilled under COINTELPRO were also subject, without their knowledge of course, to MKUltra mind control operations. And that's not all. Over the very same time period, the CIA was also running a program that closely mirrored COINTELPRO called Operation Chaos. And under that operation, the CIA targeted American citizens on American soil, oftentimes right alongside COINTELPRO operators from the FBI. So, in other words, two massive surveillance and false flag operations intersected at once, and they both intersected with a CIA mind control operation, a mind control operation that, by the way, isn't even disputed. The feds fully admit that MKUltra happened. They admit that COINTELPRO and Operation Chaos happened as well. Because the occupied U.S. government was weaponizing the state and every applicable tentacle of the state against the American people, just like they're doing today. But today it's even bigger. And it's extending to the state level. Florida's not alone in all of this. While HB945 looks to be the most expansive, most aggressive piece of Noahide legislation that we have seen thus far, states all over the country, including Florida, of course, have taken measures to track and police the speech and thoughts of the citizenry, especially kids. And there's a reason for that. Because profiles are being built on every single child in America. And as they age through the years, those files will get bigger and bigger. And by the time they reach adulthood, they will have a Noahide credit score and a credit report that employees and lenders and, of course, law enforcement will be able to pull each time their name comes up. Over the course of years, state by state, legislation has been passed and executive orders have been signed into place that grants government legitimacy to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism. It's a working definition, which means that it's always changing. And those that are applying that definition can twist it and mold it in any way that they want to in the name of labeling you an anti-Semite. The definition really provides the framework for everything that we're talking about right now. If you violate that definition, you will be labeled an anti-Semite and you will be placed on the wrong side of the Noahide enforcement network. And in Florida, this definition was codified into law through legislation sponsored by Randy Fine when he was a member of the state legislature. Public schools are incentivized through state funding to target and punish children who are accused of saying something anti-Semitic. Arkansas has passed similar legislation, so has Oklahoma. And in Virginia, under former Governor Glenn Youngkin, they did the very same thing while also building out a track, trace, and control system for anti-Semitic kids. We reported on this over at stewpeters.com last year. Youngkin directed, quote, the Secretary of Education and the Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security to establish a working group with representatives from the Virginia Department of Education, the State Council of Higher Education of Virginia, the Department of Criminal Justice Services, stakeholders from the Jewish community, and any other relevant federal, state, local, or community partners to design a comprehensive reporting and tracking mechanism for alleged incidents of anti-Semitism and other anti-religious bigotry. End quote. That system is now in place. That directive has been carried out, and children who are even accused of violating the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism are being tracked by everyone from their school administrators to their state and local police to members of Jewish pressure groups and big tech. And the next phase in all of this, of course, will be physical enforcement, exactly what HB 945 puts into place in Florida, where they're now taking their Zionist attacks on the brains of children even further than before, as the state legislature moves to pass a bill that will legally compel all schools receiving state funding to refer to the West Bank as Judea and Samaria, in accordance with Israel's expansionist ambitions. So just think about that. Children in Florida schools who refer to the West Bank as the West Bank will have that information placed in their Noahide profile, and that information will be sent off to Celebrite and to Unit 8200 and to the Florida Division of Law Enforcement unit that reports back to them. And if that kid says West Bank one too many times, he'll have his door kicked in. Or his parents will be labeled as extremists who are raising an extremist child, and a surveillance team, or more realistically, an AI surveillance program, will be set up to listen to everything that they say and read, everything that they write, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's where all this is heading. What we're looking at in Florida is something that we can absolutely expect to grow legs and travel to every state in the country and to take root at the federal level as well. They will double layer this state law and federal law, and when they do, it'll play off of other laws and other executive orders, just like the ones that I mentioned, and it will become all-encompassing, allowing for surveillance systems and goon squads to make sure that you don't blaspheme the state of Israel and the global cabal from Rothschild Boulevard under any circumstances, at any age, or in any place. This is COINTELPRO, this is MK Ultra, this is Operation Chaos, this is the Patriot Act and Unit 8200, Noah Hydeism, and the New Age surveillance state, all rooted into one and deployed against the American people to protect the interests of a foreign nation state that has seized control of our government. It must be snuffed out.